I buy a lot of broken Game Boys. A lot of broken Game Boys. And I do fix most of them, but some are just too far gone for my skill level. I've been selling those ones to people who are more talented than me, but I wish there was a way I could just save the most important pieces from the super corroded boards without needing to save every little component. Oh, wait. Funny Playing made one of the coolest products in the Game Boy space. I have to stop and give them some serious props because with this board, if you have the skills to transplant the CPU, RAM, and speaker, you can have a brand new GBA motherboard with all sorts of upgrades. A new amped up speaker that actually sounds good, built-in LEDs that you can adjust individually with all sorts of animations, and my personal favorite, sleep mode. It doesn't work with flash carts, but hey, sleep mode is fantastic for original hardware. While yes, this is a bit of a ship of Theseus situation, this is still the original brains of the GBA. So this is still a real Game Boy unlike its FPGA counterparts. While FPGA is cool and all, it's still hardware emulation, so not every game plays 100% like the original console. Still pretty good when well executed, but I'm almost always going to reach for original hardware. For the most part, I like to play games the way they were meant to be played, with a few upgrades. That's a huge part of why I made a GBA controller for the Switch, so I can still play Switch Online games in the correct form factor. Speaking of which, in that video, I had to cut up a GBA motherboard for the controller. And all the way back then, I knew that I was going to reuse the remains for this very project. So, no parts wasted. Come at me. But even though we now have our donor, we still have a long road ahead of us. Step 1 is removing these two chips without ruining any of the teeny tiny pins on them. Simple enough, right? Just blast them with some hot air and flux and then lift them up. Oh, actually, it kind of was that simple. As long as you're patient, use plenty of flux, and get the area heated up well enough, you shouldn't have any issues removing them like me. You'll need a lot more patience for step 2 though. Step 2 is soldering the chips back onto the new board. I opted to add the tiniest little bit of solder to each of the pads on the board. Not too much because there still is some left on the pins on the RAM and CPU, and it's already really easy to bridge these tiny things. This is going to be the smallest soldering job I have ever done, even smaller than the Ultimate PS1 I modded recently. So it's definitely time to whip out the microscope. In all honesty, this was terrifying. Not only was I scared I was going to break something, but the thought of having to hold the RAM down with my finger so close to a 300 degrees Celsius melting stick was not exactly calming. So instead, I placed it down carefully and hoped it wouldn't move on me when I soldered it to the board. Everything was going to plan, and all I had to do was some tedious solder work to make sure every last pin was secured to the new board. When I was eventually done with the RAM, it was time to strap down its bigger brother, the CPU. Once again, I had to line up all the CPU pins on all of the pads. This was genuinely the hardest part as I now had to worry about pins on all four sides of the chip, and it would always move when I lifted my finger. Ultimately, I just locked one corner down and hoped the rest was close enough. After a bunch of micro adjustments and soldering, both chips were locked and loaded. All there was left to do was slap an IPS screen in, and oh yeah, I forgot we needed to add a speaker too. Wait, did you actually want to see me do an IPS mod for the millionth time? I've done it so many times, and I just did it under 8 minutes not too long ago. Fine, let's just run it back. Insulate the back of the screen, connect the ribbon cable to the screen, stick the screen down, solder the wires very carefully because you forgot to do that first, install the buttons in foam, quickly add a speaker because you forgot they don't include one for some strange reason even though there's an amp in it and you probably want to get a new aftermarket speaker for the amp. Mush it all together, plug the 32-pin side of the ribbon cable in, screw it all down, and done. That was way faster than 8 minutes. Except I need to tear it all apart again, reflow the solder on the chips, and now we're in business, baby. Almost had it first try. I did have one weird issue on the first successful boot. It would read the game and fade to white, but then it was just stuck. At first, I thought I needed to take another stab at reflowing the solder, but before I opened it up again, I figured I should try to see what happens when I try an original cartridge, and it worked just fine. So I swapped back to a GBA game, and it was also just fine. I don't know if the switch on my cart slot was stuck or what, but I've had zero issues since then. It was all very odd. But honestly, I have no serious complaints with this mod. Hey, future Jake, I wanted to just let you guys know that sleep mode might not work depending on the game you're using. Not in the sense that it doesn't work, it'll go into sleep, but if your menu will open up with B or A, good luck, because you'll unpause it when you put it into sleep mode, like what happens in Mario Pinball here. If you're playing a game like Pokemon, which most of you are probably going to use sleep mode with Pokemon, it should be fine as long as you're in an area where you're not going to get into any trouble. I did go into this pretty skeptical because normally funny playing products can have some fun little quirks you get to deal with. But this was genuinely a good experience, especially for how advanced this mod is. No pun intended. It adds features that would normally require extra time and money to add, or are even just impossible to add to an original motherboard. It still does seem a little sketchy since Funny Playing seems to have wiped the written tutorial from existence, unless they just never made one, but I swear I saw one a while ago. I was starting to think it was just a bad product because I had also heard some horror stories about it from some of my subscribers, but everything went fairly well for me, all things considered. I guess we should dive a little deeper into testing just to make sure. With this board, I used High-Speed Ito's V2 kit and ran the exact same tests as last time. Unfortunately, this board is not as efficient as the original motherboard, but it's not too bad. I was pulling 215 milliamps with these solid blue LEDs and no sound at the same brightness level as last time. No matter which IPS kit you use, this motherboard with no LEDs and no sound will draw about 25 to 35 more milliamps than the numbers you see on screen. Add around 15 milliamps if you play at max volume, and add 15 to 30 milliamps on top of that depending on the LED effect you use. Also, sleep mode draws about 90 milliamps. Obviously, it's going to drain more power with all the new additions, but with the benefit of sleep mode, I'm not complaining. But if I could share one itty bitty complaint though, I love how much customization there is with the LEDs. Don't get me wrong. There's different modes, effects, colors, saturation, and brightness levels. Oh my. But I wish there was a quick setting for like the solid colors of the rainbow, because to make all of the LEDs blue, I have to change them one LED at a time, cycling through the entire rainbow. It takes so long to change all the LEDs to just one solid color. But honestly, with all the options they give you, it's totally forgivable. At the very least, though, Funny Playing could do a better job of explaining how to change the LEDs. I just kind of stumbled upon it, and I still don't really know how I changed it. Just include a little business card with instructions. Easy peasy. It's gonna add like 2 cents to it. Oh no, big whoop. Other than that, this thing is fantastic. Dare I say, the coolest thing Funny Playing has ever done. Please do this with all the models. I'm begging. There are so many perfectly functional CPUs out there that are just on crusty boards begging to be saved. And as cool as some of those other replacement boards are, this one is much easier and doesn't require swapping over every single little tiny component. Most of this board is made up of brand new parts and is perfect for some of the Game Boys in my graveyard drawer. I genuinely cannot wait to do more of these. So what do you guys think? Are you going to try one of these? Have you already tried one of these? Let me know in those comments down below. I will say that this is not for beginners. You're definitely going to want to have some practice under your belt before attempting this mod. But at the same time, it wasn't as hard as I was expecting. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. And if you're new here, please subscribe. When you do, it makes me feel all warm inside. And shout out to all my channel members who got to watch this early. But anyways, like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Later, guys. I'm not as look as I dumb. Maybe I am.